welcome to a new episode by Articulations from Iterate. My name is Laura Edgerton. I'm the editorial director of Iterate. And with me today are the Sinistry. I'm delighted to be sitting in a beautiful garden in East London. So the Sinistry, who were founded in 2017 in London, a visionary collaboration between artists Bert Gilbert and Izette Ers, transcending traditional boundaries to engage in creative and emotional dialogue. Gilbert's energetic artwork decodes layers of subtext within conversation, while Ers responds with meticulous stitchwork and applique. Together they draw inspiration from Jungian psychoanalysis to explore the union for male and female, a so-called syzygy. Inaugural project, a series of genderless liberation suits, which I just had the pleasure of looking at here, offer both the wearer and viewer visceral emancipation from conscious and unconscious realm. This collaboration exemplifies an amalgamation of mediums driven by a shared commitment to probing human connection and self-discovery. So what I really want us to all get out of today is to unpack the ways in which you work together, what draws you together, and really what you want people to come away with from seeing your work. So let's start with where we all start with how we're named, with our very beginnings, our origins. So the Sinistry. Myself being left-handed, I've always had a real connection with the sinister, with the left-hand side of the brain, with how we work. I know there's many different levels in which you came upon this name. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think that the left-handed thing is always, we have this wordplay with our work. So it started with that, and then sinister turned sinistry, which is not an existing word, but it's kind of felt right. I don't know, what do you think about it?
Well, also, we discovered after the fact that in astrology, there's a sinister where two people's charts meet. So I think it was, again, started with this idea of the subconscious, which I would sort of associate with the left, and then essentially that idea of something that's hidden beneath.
A bit like the shadow as well, because people with the right hand, the left hand is your shadow. I think we wanted to look darker. We were just kind of consciously looking.
And then there's a genderization of that.
Yeah.
I think as well. Sinister feels more feminine than male to me.
Weaker somehow, no? In some sense, in that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think it's kind of multi-layered. It's quite difficult. And also there was something that was humorous in it for us.
Also in politics, like left, like sinister means left in Latin. So it's like, it's like it comes from there probably, and then all the meanings in different parts and in different languages, it's kind of felt right.
And also it was a kind of wordplay on ministry.
Yeah, as well.
There's something that was like vaguely evangelical about it. Like there was a religious overtone to it.
I know.
Which I quite like. Yeah. It's like there's something that's like sort of slightly self-aggrandizing in it.
And
like,
also,
we are the sinistry
down
of it.
we just started to use it as like our point of view, like the sinistry of something, like sinistry of
music,
sinistry of fashion, sinistry of art.
Of this self-elected body of
exactly.
professionalism.
Exactly.
So there was that as well. And then subsequently, I think I was kind of fascinated with this, the fact that there was an astrology connection, even though it's spelled differently. I just like the fact that there is this intersection, like a Vescus Pisces, of where two things meet and how at those points how they complement. It's like the masculine and the feminine.
So it's a union as well.
It's
balance and symmetry is there.
And crossover and like overlap.
And perhaps like without being like, again, over the top, like a sort of divine union of something. Like the idea of it, I don't know if pure is the right word, but like alchemical.
It's the origins as well.
Yeah, it's going back because that's where two. I mean, I use that in my practice separately, that prices, but I would just think that this is how it works together with those two things mean.
I mean, that takes you back to Jung, of course, between the unconscious and the conscious mind.
And then that's where the syzygy, so that's where he talks about syzygy of divine masculine, divine feminine. He talks about that kind of meaning.
What made you become an artist? Was there a particular work or cultural experience that made you think, I've got to make work? Did it come at similar?
For me, it's slightly different obviously to Bert because I studied in St. Martin's, I did foundation and I did BA in fashion, but I was always interested like into, like drawing, making stuff, all this stuff, but I just used it in a different medium. It was like an emotional take mainly. And also I worked quite a long period in fashion. I just needed to have a break. It was kind of, I took some time off and then I met her at this around the same time. So it
When
kind
you were
of
wanting to
occurred.
do your own thing.
I
as
wanted
well.
to do something, my own thing, but it wasn't, it had to be something different with creativity. And I thought that was the right medium for me.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't
because
know.
I think it's quite lonely to start out being an artist. It does require like a degree of like self-belief and like or delusion. You
I know
know,
also like obviously you carry like what I was before, the whole ego and the titles, you have to everything. Like for me was a change. I went through change psychologically. Like it just got who I was, who I thought I was, and all these things. You need to kind of more like knowing yourself, go a bit more deeper. And I think I just realized who I was. I can use in art, which I kind of sometimes I don't think fashion necessarily reflected exactly who I was. I think it's more like more of a medium that I kind of, when I do things people see, they will have an idea who I am now, and it makes me, I think I'm happier with myself.
It's the emotion side.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
fundamental. I mean, it's one of those
Yeah.
forces that pulls you towards it.
yeah. I mean, I personally have conflicting relationships. Like, I think it's typical. I think it's not something that you choose. I think it's something that you have a compulsion to do, and that is,
Yeah.
you know, I find that it can be quite lonely. You know, so it's nicer to have to work with somebody because it is extremely existential. I do think that it's given to you rather than you choose to do it.
How old were you when you knew you were going to be an artist?
I mean, from very little. Like, I mean, I got into medical school at the same time I got into art school, and there was this conflict because I think I am a frustrated surgeon in here, and I come from like my father, my great grandpa, they were all dentists, and they all wanted me to go into medical school, and I kind of did it. I went to St. Martin's originally just to piss it off. So you know, there's a weird tension in it for me.
Yeah, but I think it's quite similarities, I'd say. The idea, the surge, like I think to be a doc and artist, I think it's kind
Well,
of.
they worked.
I think it's you can find. I think there is definitely similarities.
Well, they originally, the artists were brought in to draw the body in order to communicate. You know,
Yeah.
so there was always a relationship there. Interestingly, I did work as a medical illustrator for a while, but because I was always so. I think for me, there's always this angle of the investigation of looking physically at the body and then looking at its interior and exterior, like on many different levels.
So we very much focus on storytelling and narrative kind of within that. And I feel we've already gone through many different kind of thematics throughout history and psychology within your work. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your subject matter, I suppose, in a way. And let's get back to manifesto, because obviously crucial to your work when you launched with these fantastic liberation suits, it was all based on a manifesto. We just had a recent essay in our magazine about surrealism. There's obviously connections going back to Andre Breton, 1924, that time. So can I talk to you a little bit about why you felt it's important to have a manifesto and then how it manifested itself in your work?
I think because between us, all of the work really comes out of the conversations on a personal level.
Yeah.
And that's how we met, this kind of interplay and a lot of jokes. I think there's something about distilling something down in words that can be
With humor.
with humor.
It's like
yeah.
the humor meets the conversation, but then you're distilling it with like a very sharp humor, which kind of doesn't need too much to talk about it, because the minute you laugh at something, it kind of brings the light into it. It kind of opens. So I think it helps us a lot, both of us, to go.
Well, you can go dark, and
But
some
the
of it's quite
yeah.
cutting, but
Yeah.
there's a darkness and a lightness at the same time. And I think there's something about humor that it is sort of arrow through things. It can get a point across a lot quicker than a massive text. And it's the point of cliches. There's something in cliches. There's an ancient or inherited wisdom to them.
Yeah.
Because if you can distill something down to a line or a word, it's like a symbol, isn't it? It kind of cuts through
A way of saying it as well, like because we use certain phrases and like certain puns and all the things is almost like as you talk, like the words, they become somehow the sequence of it, makes it, brings the humor out, and it kind of almost ignites the whole, oh, okay, this is what it means. And it's
And I
kind
do
of
love a pun. I do think it's like, I mean, what someone told me it was the lowest form of wit. I think it's, I don't know if I agree with that. I just think it can cut through quite dense topic. So the idea with when we create these manifestos, which again is essentially quite pretentious on some level, but I kind of like that pretension because it's also, if you read what we're doing, it's meant, there's a lightness and there's levity in there, but there's also light and dark.
And you're talking about bleeding between the lines and the pain you're saying, like between a conversation with someone. I think you need the humor to talk about it. Otherwise, it gets too much. Yeah, it kind of becomes too contained.
And also, I think it's extremely visual. For example, that phrase is definitely how I would view my own practice of bleeding. I think as artists, you do bleed between the lines or read between the lines. What is said is not meant. Like you can feel.
Yeah.
I'm always been fascinated in subtext. And so both of us have, and that's the wordplay in it, because I think some people say things and it's like you could feel well, that doesn't feel right. Or so I kind of think both of us love that kind of play in like what is said is not meant. And although what we're saying is meant, but it's also not. It's it's kind of round and round it goes. It's like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think just kind of in all these layers, how deep you can go through these layers to understand what it means. And then you realize it is also psychology. We don't only have one layer. Like you need to go deeper and you can work further. So I think it's just like a continuous work, which we can't kind of show it also in our work. So it's not just one direction. It's not, we don't want to just say this, or there is something else underneath that, and also there is more underneath that.
Well, it's a duality, isn't it, of what? It's like
definitely duality.
Two things exist. It's like either or, neither nor. It's like there's a quantumness in it. It's not just yes and no. It's not binary in it. It can be interpreted in multitude of ways.
Yeah, and also they can be both, right? The whole idea of there can be duality and like both
are right.
Opposite can be possible and they can exist without contradicting each other. I mean, you can't contradict, but they can exist. There's a paradox in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, again, goes back to you and holding the tension of the opposites, and then you hold it. And then when you stay there long, a new option comes out as a creative, like that's all the creativity comes if you stay long in that tension.
Fascinating. I mean, can we talk a little bit more about the kind of the legibility of the languages? Because, language, as we're hearing, is so key, similar to your practice. But you looked at some wonderful examples of your manifesto using many different types of scripts, which are ancient, some of them maybe are lost. Can you talk a little bit about specific languages and legibility and understanding and kind of clarity, and how you kind of either stitch them or print them, and what your experience of these languages and text and alphabets, glyphs, symbols are in your practice?
I mean, I think, again, it comes back down to the idea of words being incantations and resonant on many levels. So when the word is spoken, it has its own vibration in that, but then also that can be represented symbolically. There's another way to feel the words symbolically as well as what's written. So for me, the symbol or the glyph, it's a simplification, but also another way of looking at what we're trying to say. There's a bridge or a thread through all of these different, I would call them languages,
It's kind of, you use sometimes the same symbols, but it can mean totally different, but then you can separate them each, and then they have a visual, but also every language has a different tonation and different word. It's like, it's so many things done, and it's kind of fascinating. And it's all about to understand each other. It goes back to connection, communication, connection, all of the stuff, but also it's a major miscommunication and cut off the connection. You use it in a way, it's again like holding the opposite, like it's like duality is a separator or connector. You choose it while you go through it. And even like that other languages like Hebrew and like totally different alphabet, And then we use like cuneiform as one of the first like phonetic writing way. So it's like so many things in the history and like different cultures are used. I think it's fascinating, but for us using it, for me, it's like just that symbol and also the repetition of
I
it.
was going to say repetition.
The
is key, isn't
repetition
it?
of it.
In different
Yeah.
examples of your work, in different
Yeah, and also
mediums.
the sequence and the repetitions of it in different sequences makes us understand each other.
But also, for me, the symbols are also ideograms, so they hold a whole concept in that one symbol.
Yeah.
And I love that idea that you can reduce something down to a whole concept that can be held just in the symbol of an eye or the symbol of a snake, that translates across time and all civilized and like all different cultures of symbols, and they're in every culture.
And comes back that cave, we were last we were looking, they found in the caves like the oldest things, and it still has very similarities because it's kind of this almost from the unconscious, probably. It's kind of an archetype, so we kind of go
They're
into
archaic symbols. Some people say that if like when you kind of rub your eyes, there's you can see these certain patterns when you rub your eyes, and that these were where the original kind of mark makings in caves came from. These like archaic symbols that first started out as lines, then developed into sort of written language like the cuneiform, and then it kind of translated. Then it starts to be spoken. But it's not an accurate like history that I'm explaining. But
this is what's interesting, isn't it? Because you're fictionalizing this. You're creating a fiction in some senses.
Yeah,
that's rooted in.
It's rooted. Yeah.
Or is it rooted more historically?
I think it's a combination of things that are already inherent. I think it's like remembering things that we've forgotten
as humans.
Humans,
exactly.
Yeah. I think this remembering of a lot of different ways of being, ways of connecting, ways of seeing, ways of feeling.
And I ask you a little bit about the senses as well, because I think the parts of the body are vital as well in what you're actually producing in your subject matter. And that kind of basic human sense of sight or touch, how do they feed in as well? Do you see that coming through?
Well, yes, we spent thousands of hours on that. Within that is all of the senses are in there at some point. What you hear, see, feel, touch, taste.
We use them also as symbology. Like obviously, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. We just put down these like sensory like organs, and then, but then again with the language, like what the phrases become and what was originally for, like is again play. I don't know if I'm answering
and it's a game
the
too.
question.
I think it comes back to the games. I mean, the I Spy that we were just looking at, the Snakes and Ladders.
Yeah, our research was actually like all these old board games that like no one remembers how it's played as well. So I think it's kind of our attempt to kind of bring it and just like see what happens if we created like.
Well, also there's like rules to a game, but then some people are playing them and some other people aren't playing them.
There are rules almost not to have them.
We discovered this ancient board game called and they've forgotten the rules of it. It's a coiled snake. You apparently used to throw sticks, but no one can remember how to play it. And then, it just became this
wordplay.
This sort of lunacy wordplay of which rules to follow. And that really no one's really winning on any level.
Yeah. I think it's again like social construct. Like kind of we play all that rules we're talking about, all the social constructs we kind of on a daily basis going through. And then they become sometimes like social contracts, and it's actually not contractual. You just want to play it differently, and you find yourself, because I did it a certain way. So I think all our sense is going back to seeing, hearing things is all part of it, because
surveillance
of self
and of others. Like I often feel like there is a game being played that I don't know the rules to, and that maybe I should, take things less seriously as a result.
It's not a level playing field.
Definitely not. So it's like, okay, if we view it like that, then maybe that's easier to play along if you realize that nothing is personal.
Yeah.
That also, I always feel when I think like that way, and I also feel like They don't know the game anyway. They're
Yeah.
playing a game they don't even know. So it's actually more dangerous.
I-
It's kind of a really, it's kind of a tricky way to see it like that. But I think it's like what makes life. When
Yeah,
fact
I think
makes
that's
life.
the thing.
So
If there's a game being played, then like, can everyone follow some rules for a start? And because it feels like it's just
Yeah.
like it's uneven on some level.
The game of life is the beginning.
A game of life, because
Mhm.
it is
no one knows the rules.
And who's setting the rules?
currently like the people in power. I'm not sure what they've signed up to win. You know, especially if we look at it on a deeper level of like, what power are you gaining when we're all living on the same planet?
Yeah. So the
You
power
know.
of art, of course, is it's social commentary in this sense.
There has,
Um,
there has
yeah.
to be another. Essentially, that is the
I
role
mean,
of an artist, is to
yeah.
give another, is to give a different aspect on it.
Yeah, and also always you're looking from your own identity as well, and your identity is always political. You know, just like because you're part of a society and you're part of a community and part of like whatever you're part of is changing the meaning. So, you know, that's why our work at one level, it doesn't start really political, but it is political because you can't separate certain parts of yourself. You are many things at once. I think it makes a lot of like it's your main tools, but those are the things what you people think like, oh, I see something, I hear something like facts, but then there's a total part of it comes from unconscious. You're here as a whole personalities, as a sensor, thing ready to waiting, like things coming from the unconscious, and try to make sense of it and maybe try to put into work. Like I think it's constantly like different parts of us
so
working
identity-
and ever evolving, constant influx back and forth. Actually, hence our work, the masks are part of that as well. There's a continuous, like a quantum persona that we constantly react with different people, different locations, different circumstances. We always change. Sometimes that kind of helps us find our way in this game.
Yeah, but I do think as an artist that you're often quite abject, though. There's that you're outside of as well as in. You know, like that's a kind of, there is a distance,
Yeah,
and it's you're kind of trying to consciously investigate your subconscious,
yeah.
which is no.
You can't do it with that persona. You can't do it with a mask. You have to try
Yeah, you have
try
to
to
try
get
and-
them off. Yeah,
And actually,
yeah.
it's
Very
not,
discombobulating.
it's like
Brave.
it's existential, it's vulnerable, and it's also it's not. I don't think if I had a choice, I'd choose to be an artist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, well, no, I think
Yeah.
it's for me. It's like there's it's a compulsion to
Yeah.
kind of try and investigate something that I don't understand. But I think it's a blessing and a curse, because I sometimes just like to not be kind of trying to constantly
No, but also
probe something to find out. I'm like, could I just relax over here? Like,
because the beauty of it is because you kind of question something unknown. But the problem with it is as well because it is unknown, so you don't know it. So there is fear. So you're approaching with fear, but you have to let your fear, like the guard of master,
Yeah,
to
fear.
play a little bit. You have to relax a little bit, so the things will come and show it themselves.
but then also then bring it back to some form.
No,
I
and
think
then
there's like
create it to make it manifest, like somehow whatever it's coming, to turn it into something.
which again sounds slightly grandiose, but I think it, that's anyway. That's what it feels like. You're basically taking things that are invisible and bring them down into a visible medium of some form.
Yeah.
Can I go back to ask about how the partnership helps in that sense?
Well, I think it's quicker.
working to
It's much quicker to be in
Yeah.
collaboration, because you can bounce ideas off each other, rather than in my own practice, I can spend months, hours, years to dragging myself around with something. Whereas in this, we can be yes or no with it.
There's
Yeah, and
repetition.
And it's kinetics. There's an energy in it,
Yeah.
because you got, and also somebody doing something else. Like, I think what that's taught me about the idea of doing and being, because I'm always like, I kind of like to be doing something all the time. And when I see him doing something, I'm like, oh, I should be doing something. Whereas actually, it's about being able to relax and be like, okay, he's doing that. I can hold something else. I don't have to always be doing something. You know, if that makes
And I think also when you're two people, the trigger, like when you talk about ideas, whatever is like you feel the tension and the trigger, I think that's the right place to go.
Yeah.
We find it so we almost like each other's radar.
Yeah.
Like it's like this antenna, like something is coming to me and like there is almost like bouncing off.
And also,
And that bounce is very important.
he can catch what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say,
and
I can
vice
catch.
versa.
So sometimes it's like that, and that is actually very
Yeah.
difficult to do on your own.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
in my own practice, I can sometimes just not catch, and then I'm like in some kind of whirlpool of, I don't know,
Yeah.
the various different
It's just
emotions.
also normal. Sometimes you don't hear what you say. And like, oh, did you just hear what you said? Or did you just hear? Like, it's just like catching that moment. It's like that bouncing, that like very.
I would say that between it's a high level of vigilance between, in a positive aspect of like we're listening and seeing and looking for what the other's doing, but in a healthy way.
Yeah.
You know, normally you would be looking, you're like, what are you doing? Whereas this is much gentler and it's like more, there's more inquisitive.
Yeah.
Of,
Yeah, I think the
I hate using the word-
curiosity.
I hate using that word.
But I think
I think
I
that word
do.
is overused. Like,
I too. I
yeah,
think
but
it's
it
for
is.
me, it's like curious.
It's for me, there's just connotations of that specific word and the way it's used in the wellness industry and various.
Right.
things
Okay.
like
I don't know that
Irish.
connotation.
And I love the line that you have in your work. I want to be you. Without you, I couldn't be me. I mean, there's this linking and threading kind of between. And I wanted to bring that back to the analog kind of nature of your work, right? The actual kind of practical application of how you make what we see and how you divide the labor between you. It's in that conversation.
It's quite, the labor is, I mean, it feels like it's quite natural.
Yeah.
You know, it's
think
again like a game.
yeah,
We often describe it as a game of exquisite corpse. It can pass between us, and there's a trust. That's ultimately the difference. Is there's a trust. I've been in a lot of collaborations where it's been uneven. This never feels like that. It feels like, oh, I think that's for me the key is the trust between us.
I mean, how it goes generally to create stuff is like beginning is like, something comes maybe energetic from that. And then I take it and I use something, maybe something more contained, like a stitch or something on it. And then till we decide, and it kind of comes that we both know, oh, this is it now. And then from that point, if you're going to do a series of them, then we can work from both, like whichever we can work on it together.
And the tension that because there's two people working on it, wherever they're working on it, there's a thread that's pulled or loosened between us. So it's kind of quite subtle in that there's this that we like you kind of know it's something's going to come, but you don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And so there's a belief there as well that like, okay, which I think on your own you can often lose belief in something. You sort of the energy goes around it. And it takes quite a lot to get back in, whereas this is easier to kind of jump in and jump out. You know, it feels like, again, like an expansion and a contraction on something.
But how about the aesthetic choices?
I think we both have similar aesthetics on different ways. Like, you know,
and also,
that's intuitive. It's like, yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah, we have very different aesthetics. What we're doing is its own aesthetic. I think it's a really good amalgamation and like mixture and like alchemical. Like they can't go back to me or to her. It becomes Sinistry, and like like when you cook ingredients and it becomes
it's something else.
You know that it tastes good when you know it, and like it, it's not for everyone, but it is for us. It's like, oh yeah, this is cooked perfect now. We know that moment, and then they are ready to other people.
I mean, it's rare that we have made some things that we just
undercooked,
or we just can't bring. We made this piece of a map of brilliance, which is not brilliant. And like, we really tried hard on it. And
I mean,
it's
there's
like,
so much work. There's
also the title is ridiculous.
Yeah,
I think that you have to accept when something is not working.
There's not working. Yeah,
there is when you've like, okay, let's give up. Also knowing when to give something up. Like, okay, no. I think there's some kind of binary
they usually
yes
I
and
think
no's in the non-binary of the whole thing.
But I think it kind of evokes like emotions quite a lot. The pieces generally, like at the end.
In yourselves
of.
or in the...
I mean, in me as well. I know it all. It kind of, when I
Well, they're
see
like
like there is,
children, though, aren't they?
yeah,
as
I
well?
don't
They're
want,
like being
yeah,
birthed.
yeah,
You know, you're like, oh, look at that.
There's a
Took
physicality
out-
to them,
yeah,
isn't there? It's an intentional physicality, right?
yeah,
In the stitching, the handmade.
I think a lot of the comments that we got were like that people were emotional.
yeah, emotional, yeah,
They were like, yeah, they could feel the work in there.
yeah,
Or like what had been, I don't know how to put it, whatever their emotions were.
yeah. They were, yeah, definitely like carriers of that emotion.
Yeah.
It's going into like going back again, all these conversations. So starting from the manifesto, all the conversation, all these trials, all the games and back and forth, it's all actually embodied for that piece of work. So even you see a tiny piece of art, you have everything. It's all like
You
they
mean
all
like a fractal of it? It's like a holographic fractal of something.
Exactly. I mean,
It's the
late
whole
from
thing.
the big installations, even we don't just give all like, oh, this installation needs more work. I mean, we give the same
I think
attention to
it makes
everything.
more sense when you see the work as an installation, though, for others. You know what I mean? Because
Like, you then get an insight into your journey, into the initial.
well, then you can
idea
make the
and
links. I think then you can make
Yeah.
the links.
Yeah.
Because the reason of making stuff is so sometimes you don't have to explain things.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's
Oh, it is a forward communication.
yeah, it's like
exactly.
I did all this. Going to be quiet over here.
Always all the inspirations, everything still came. I was connected, but then I think it comes to a level. I think probably Bert was the right person and at the right moment. So it just kind of really evoked this. Oh, I need to do that.
Inspiration.
Yeah, I think she's my inspiration,
Kind
definitely.
of inspiring.
I was like, if she can be an artist, I can be as well.